Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. What does photography mean to you?
It's presence in the moment. It's being, in a way, it's practicing the skills that a hunter would have in the way that you frame yourself, the way that you're looking at your target, whatever it is, if it's a person, if it's an animal. Yeah, but I remember reading, I forget his name now, but he's an author, and he has always worked with children in particular and bringing them out into nature. And one of the questions that he's been asked more frequently now is, you know, the use of phones, and when people bring phones out into nature when they go for a walk and they take pictures of everything. And I suppose coming at it from a way of, you know, back in the day when we used to have those disposable cameras, like you had 24 shots that you could take, that was it. And so you were really careful about, okay, this is the shot that I want to take because I don't have endless capacity. Whereas now, of course, we just shoot. And yeah, so he had a lot of parents coming to him about, you know, my child's just constantly on their phone and taking pictures, even when we're out. And he described it as a way as, when you have a photographer's eye, it is connecting you in the same way that if you were hunting something, if you were looking through the distance of, you saw a deer, for example, that you wanted to shoot, you have to be aware of where the wind is coming from, how you're framing yourself, how you're moving in order to not disturb what it is that is in front of you that you want to capture in a shot or in an actual shot. And so he said taking photos in nature can actually be a really beautiful way of connecting with the subject or whatever it is that you're taking. And I always remember that when I guide people now is I don't have a rule of like, put your phones away. But I say whatever brings you into connection. If you see a beautiful caterpillar just hanging out on a leaf and you want to take a photo of it, and you're framing yourself and, you know, gently sort of introducing yourself almost, being aware that, you know, if you get too close to the butterfly that you're trying to capture, or if you move in a way that changes the way that a leaf moves or where your shadow is cast, you're bringing your body into awareness of your surroundings, and that can be incredibly powerful as a way of connecting.
Jasmine Nunns. That's great. Thank you for joining me on Shooting It Raw. What a beautiful way to introduce yourself. Jasmine Nunns, you are in Hong Kong. I am in Hong Kong, but we're talking over Zoom, and we're just connecting this way. I'll describe just how I see you, because it's beautiful. You've got essentially nice light. You've got behind you, you've got this wild green plants, indoor plants, really framing your face. It's great. You look fantastic. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm very happy to have you on the podcast. Clearly, you're very articulate, and you just from your introduction, wow, so many doors, and it's so Let's dive in. So. I'll start with the first photo. It looks like a cat snake, or is that a baby rat snake? Do you know?
I thought at first it was a checkered keelback, but I was told by a friend who asked a snake expert, and it turns out it's a Taiwanese kukri.
Kukri. Oh, nice. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Do you know why it's called a kukri snake?
I don't.
Because they eat eggs, and they've got these 2, I think, or maybe more teeth in their I think upper jaw, and that looks like a kukri knife, you know, like the sort of, I think it's from New Zealand or whatever, and they're exceedingly sharp. And so I was walking with William Sargent, who knows a lot about snakes, and he said he got once a little cut and he said it was unbelievably sharp.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So for the photograph, it's basically the whole, it's a vertical composition. It's the whole body of the snake It looks like it's climbing. Yeah, it's going down. It's a very arboreal snake, so it's very good, a good climber. It's the whole snake body. You don't see its eyes. You just see the pattern on the bark, and then you also see the green leaves, some very flat green leaves, kind of almost like a parasitic plant, kind of growing up the trunk. So why is this photo meaningful? Why are we starting with this photo?
Well, it was the first photo that came to mind when you said, Sen 3, that sort of represents where it is that where I am at the moment. And the snake for me has always been a guide, a teacher, almost like a little reminder of a milestone. Because snakes have always come to me in really, really important and transformative points in my life. And so the moment that I saw this snake, it wasn't too long ago, it was a couple of months ago. I was standing at the start of a trail, and I was just really overwhelmed with everything that was going on, and just with things that have been going on personally, with COVID, with the state of the world, with what Hong Kong has been going through. And I just had a little cry. I was just standing there crying, and then just in one of those, unexplainable moments, it was just, my body just turned. And for some reason, I looked up to the trunk of this tree, and I saw the snake climbing down. And just, in that moment, like, oh, what a gift. and I just watched it just slowly slither down, the sort of crinkled bark of the tree, and just watched it for the entirety of its journey. And it took its time. It was really just mesmerizing. And really, for me, the significance of the snake and the symbol of the snake has always been about shedding and transformation and letting go, in the way that, the snakes shed their skin, and they do so. They have to in order to survive. Snakes that don't shed will die. And for me, it's a constant reminder of what it is that I need to let go of, and what I'm ready to let go of, what I'm holding on to for dear life.
Wow.
And just that reminder of like, let it go. It doesn't belong to me.
So one of the things about the photograph, the bark isn't very raised. So the profile of the bark is actually quite low. And what's amazing about these snakes is that they're extremely good tree climbers. I mean, is that actually, now that I look at it, is that a bark? Is it bark or is it rock?
It's tree. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's a tree.
Because there's, but the camouflage is very, very strong. And I can just imagine the sort of, first of all, that you're in Hong Kong with such an amazing diversity of snakes to have around you. I could see how you grew up here, right?
Yes.
How that would impact on you. And just, I could totally imagine you turning and then suddenly just your eye kind of, or your brain just kind of seeing it. And it was kind of almost like what you needed to see at that moment.
Exactly.
Wow. That's, fantastic. Great snake. Okay, let's move on to the next photo. I strongly urge people to go check out these photographs, because we'll get into why you're so connected to the outdoors and landscape and just the language that you're using right now, the words you're using. I think people are beginning to pick up on what's important to you. Okay, so why don't you describe the second photograph?
So the second one, well, it was captured just at dusk. So towards the end of a day. And I was hiking up along a river gorge with a group of girls. And I was actually showing them some of the plants that are around us that we could use as tea. And so sort of, coming down from a place where we were, in terms of elevation, we were lower and climbing up on these boulders and on these rocks. And I was looking up at this plant, and then just there, highlighted was the silver of the moon. Mm-hmm. And it just, in that moment, was magic. It was anytime that I catch, the moon in the sky, it just feels like, oh, wow, there you are. And And then also this idea that, the moon was always there. She was always up in the sky, especially during that cycle. But of course, we can't see with the bright daylight. And so it was just this reminder, framing that picture in a way where you saw the plants coming up from the ground and then you had this magic of the moon above. It was, yeah, I guess another way of reminding me of that connection and that magic and that awe, and being in a state of awe is, how important that is in our lives. And so I think if every day I could just, remind myself or be in a place where I'm like, oh. Wow.
Okay, so two things I'm noticing. Well, one, I'll describe the image. Okay, so, it's basically in the landscape format of it. It's mostly blue sky, but that sort of dusk, the rich blue that comes out at dusk. There's barely the hint of a cloud, barely a hint of a cloud. There's a kind of a pine. It doesn't look big enough to be a tree, but it looks like it's out of focus pine leaves branch on the bottom, sort of the left, let's say third of the image. And on the right is more in focus, another tree, and you barely see it also in silhouette. But the moon is in focus. It's like a half moon, small and far away. And so that, in terms of the image, that's what I'm seeing. But then the other thing that's simultaneously happening, which is great, is that as you're talking about it, and you're talking about this sort of the impact and the meaningfulness of it, your eyes are just like alive, It's just like, I can, you have very expressive eyes. So it's kind of like, I'm sure it also comes through the audio, but okay. So you're with these girls. Describe the hours before that, or why you're there, or that experience. Like what? Because in a way, one theory of photography is that each time you trip the shutter, your whole lifetime of experience up to that point informs your choice, why you've picked that. Like everything that makes you is behind that behavior that says click. And then to freeze that photo. So describe the day. Why you were there and why is it meaningful?
I love that. Yeah. Just what we bring to the lens from before. So that day, I remember it quite clearly. It was the day before, it was during summer, and it was the day before Hong Kong went into, I guess, its most extreme version of lockdown, where we couldn't gather anymore as a group. There was only like max 2 people that could be out. And we knew that this was coming. And so this was the last day, essentially, that I could run a program with even a small group of 3 girls. And so it kind of felt like an ending in a way of, right, well, we can't do this anymore after today. And that whole day I'd been running these programs. And so that was my second or maybe even third program of the day. And I thought I'd be exhausted trying to squeeze in as many of these experiences as I could for the girls themselves, for the parents, for families. And but it just felt really energizing to be up there, walking and guiding them up along a river gorge where, their senses are brought to life, having to really get to remind themselves of what it feels like to be in their bodies. And with all of this, all of the online learning and everything kind of going virtual and the screen time that we're all getting, it's a treat for our bodies, for our eyes, for our senses to be out, to feel what the wind feels like when it's on our skin, to know every time we step on a rock, the texture of the rock, and even if we feel it through our shoes, and the smell of the water. And so all of these things that are happening often on quite a subconscious level, it's healing, it's therapeutic for our bodies and for our minds to be in spaces like this. So, as the guide, I have my senses on alert in different ways, in noticing what's around in our environment, but then also noticing where it is that the girls might need support. And I mean, in what I do, it's also noticing when to step back and let them have their experience without kind of interjecting, or adulting, as some people would call it. And yeah, and so I think, it was in that moment where my focus was probably really attentive into, are they okay? Where are they putting their foot? Where are the wobbly rocks? And then just kind of swiveling my head around and being like, oh, the moon. I think even in that moment, I was so like flabbergasted by this view of the moon. And I have this experience a lot where I see something and I'm just enmeshed in it and I can't look away. And people are like, what's the big deal?
Right.
Like, oh yeah, that's nice. But then sometimes, you'll get people who will just stand there and just, for as long as it takes, just to stare and to witness and to, take in the preciousness of what it is that you're looking at. And I guess in some ways as well, it was fleeting, to know that the moon was going to pass and that the sun was going to go down even further. And
of course,
we needed to go because it was going to get dark. So.
Right. So a couple of things that sort of sparked is one of the values underlying shooting it raw, and a lot of my life and a lot of my frenetic energy is that, what if every moment really is a gift, right? So I've mentioned this many times before on the podcast. I've had 3 near-death experiences, but prior to that moment where you almost die, you would never have guessed. You could never have anticipated that the world would suddenly go in the craziest, worst direction possible, right? Like, we're learning how to surf and suddenly there's the Indian Ocean tsunami, right? Like, your brain is just like, what? And so all of these experiences, and interwoven into shooting it raw, is this notion that every moment is a gift. And if you think about the photograph right here, right? And all your photographs, like on average, let's just say a photograph captures 1/60th of a second, right? So that's 1/60th of a second of your life framed in that way. And as you say, it's fleeting and it's kind of it's there. You notice, you bring your attention and your awareness, and then in a way it's gone. And in a way, I guess having the photographs is a way, like right now, we're revisiting that moment.
Yeah.
We're re-experiencing with you that you're sharing with us.
Yeah.
And that moment that you're sharing is also you taking out these girls. So why don't you talk about their ages and roughly their makeup? So, like, what's so special about taking these girls out into the woods?
So, well, these particular girls, they were about 7 to 8.
Oh, okay, young.
And they were all friends.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, the significance and the meaning of taking out girls in particular. So I've worked in various different sort of outdoor-based organizations, and in some capacity guiding, in education, in creating experiences that I guess bridge the human and the natural world. And some of this also involved some bushcraft camping and some wilderness stuff, and which I always loved, having grown up in a village in Hong Kong, and that was just my entire childhood, was just learning through play and climbing and falling out of trees and being like, whoops, okay, well, next time I know. And and so I noticed that the more spaces that I went to in an outdoorsy kind of frame, how often underestimated I was based on the fact that I was a woman. And it was quite covert. It was really it wasn't obvious sexism, but it felt like I needed to prove myself that much more because I was a woman.
Mm.
And that, you know, if I made a fire from scratch, it was like, whoa, oh my God, big deal.
That
It's
much
like,
more impressive, right?
yes, because you're a woman and
Mm.
hey, that's really impressive. Like, well, how come it's not a big deal when that guy does it?
Mm.
And so there's these really, really kind of underlying subliminal tones of, hey, good job. You know, this
Sure.
really patronizing in some ways approach that people, I'm sure with the best intentions,
Mm.
just wanted to celebrate the time that we were out there. And, you know, in speaking to women and girls in particular, and hearing, just noticing and capturing these moments where they'd be like, oh, I would never do that if a guy was around. Or, yeah, like, I don't know why I've never made a fire before. My husband or my father or my brother always used to do it.
Mm.
And so it's not necessarily the experiences that I'm choosing to create for these girls is not to intentionally reject or exclude boys or men. It's really creating a safe space in which women and girls can explore their relationship with the natural world in a way that feels safe, in a way where
Mm-hmm.
they don't have to compare themselves to a male counterpart. And I'll give you an example. There was a woman who came through, and I forget her name now, which is terrible. But she was in the SCMP. She'd written in these incredible books and has lived in New Zealand and the US, and is an incredible wilderness expert and lives off the land entirely. But in the SCMP, they, as they were announcing her book launch, which was here, they basically referred her to the female Bear Jones.
Mm.
Bear Grylls,
Bear
sorry, Bear
Grylls, yeah,
Grylls. And I just thought, you know what, that's one day we will recognize women for the skills and the abilities and the experience that they bring, and not have to compare them to a male figure of what we see them as being, you know,
right.
somewhat par. And so these experiences for the girls was just to, you know, let's make fire, let's carve, let's whittle, let's, you know, go and explore these secret and hidden trails, and sing if you want to, and share stories if you want to, in a way that feels safe, because you know that the experience of the women and the girls around you, we share the same experience. And so that's what's meaningful for me, to be able to do that.
That's really cool. I was gonna make a really bad joke saying that I'm often called the male Dolly Parton, but that's a stupid joke. But you know, it's really sorry about that. Okay, but one of the things, Dolly Parton's amazing. Actually, she's an incredible.
She is.
Yes, she really is super switched on. But anyways, if I can give myself a compliment, no. But one of the interesting. Okay, so have you seen the show Naked and Afraid?
I've heard of it. I have heard of it.
No,
and you know
have
why?
to watch it. Why?
Rand, this is the only reason why I know about that show, and I don't know if this is real, but I got some random message on Instagram, and like, I don't know how to use Instagram really, or look at all the hidden folders of messages. But there was a woman who said, "Hey, you know, I'm like the scouting producer or whatever of Naked and Afraid, and would you consider coming on the show?" And I was like, "What is this show?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, no thanks."
I actually did try. I did send them a thing. I think I did. Anyway, so because you have to remove.
You do it?
Well, I think so. I'm happy to go get naked, but I think I think there was some kind of logistical reason why I couldn't. But the reason why I bring it up is because here's what's really fascinating: is that when you watch the show, and they're like, I don't know, 20 episodes, 30 episodes, you have a man and a woman together. So it's an interesting dynamic. And what's really great is that when you watch it, and I can see how somebody with a prejudice or a bias, or sort of who people jumps to conclusions, would think, oh, the guys who come on really strong, you'd think, oh, they're more competent or better prepared or better skilled to last. But consistently, you find that it doesn't matter. You know, like that the males and females tend to use different strategies for survival, but it looks miserable for everybody. But you know, of the average, you notice that, wait a second, you know, like as many guys as women succeed and fail and compete and don't compete. So just from what you said, I thought, how interesting. Yeah. So and I could see how, especially for girls who are trying to figure out their place socially and in a group and whatever, to have the boys there changes the dynamic. I could totally see that. Yeah, of course.
Well, and exactly to your point, I think you put it beautifully, of that, you know, we do have different strategies and we see the world in a different way, and our bodies respond in similar but also different ways. And so, yeah, it's an opportunity for, you know, whatever gender we identify with, to figure out for yourself in an environment where, you know, you feel safe to explore that without having to compare to, someone who just strategically or naturally goes about it in a very different way. You know, it's the same whether it's in a wilderness situation or with conflict resolution. We all just have various different ways to do it. It's just the space to be able to practice.
Yeah. So listen, let's plug it. So what exactly is this thing that you're running? What is it?
So Kembali is really a space, an opportunity for me to share nature connection experiences. And so there's various ways in which I choose to offer that. And it's all ways that I love to do. You know, I really created Kembali as a way to share what I love to do with other people. And so I guide forest bathing walks or forest therapy experiences, bushcraft camps. We have programs for girls from age of 7 to 13, and then also for adolescents, the families who, you know, just enjoy going camping and want to be able to kind of bring in more skills that can help them engage with the outdoors and the space a little bit more in new ways. But then equally for people who have no idea and who just want to be able to celebrate, you know, the incredible diversity of what Hong Kong and the natural space that we have here offers. You know, being able to go out and be like, right, that tree I know can actually give me fibers from the strips of the bark, or that particular plant I can use if I run out of toilet paper. And, you know, that's a particular berry that we can make as jam, or that's medicine, and that's a tea. So it's not necessarily about acquiring knowledge, but having this awareness and the information of our environment can actually help us to rebuild that connection in a greater way. One of the big things that and actually with what the next photo that's coming up will speak to more, is the importance of rites of passage, and a marking of transitions in our lives, whether it's from child moving into adolescence into adulthood, if it's changing jobs, if it's marriage, if it's divorce. The importance of marking those passages and the role that nature plays in guiding us through that too.
Right. So just to make it very basic, Kambali, how do I? And it's a website, right? So how do I find it?
So Kembali is KEMBALI.org.
Okay. Wicked. Yeah. Let me describe the next photo. I look at things, you know, aesthetically as well, right? So in this particular case, what's great is that you captured the moment. So what it is a photograph of, it looks like a fire that's been built on the beach. So there's sand. There's a driftwood. I'm assuming it's driftwood. A few rocks. There's a pot that's, you know, it's relatively large and it's clearly been used to boil water in the past because it's quite blackened and it's like a stainless steel pot. There's a wooden spoon in it. It's like you're boiling water, which is nice. I see two sets of legs because all I can see are the knees. And in one bowl on the left is smaller than the bowl on the right, which is a metallic bowl. In it, it looks like purple porridge, or probably porridge with berries in it, and what looks like sweet potato, which is aesthetically, you've got the fire, which is orange. You've got the sweet potato or whatever, which is orange. In the purple, it's just, even one of the spoons is kind of violet. So it's just like, in terms of the picturesque qualities, it's very pretty. It's eye candy. It's really, really nice. So what's the significance of this photograph?
So it's mango, actually.
Ah, sweet.
Mango sitting on top of the berry porridge, the oatmeal. Yes, you got
Nice.
it. Yeah. So it's funny because I'm a fire person. I mean, and I think, or I assume that most people are, is that once we plop ourselves down by a fire, it's just, anything can happen, and any and all stories will come out around the fire. And so this particular fire and that particular moment was captured right when we had finished making our berry oatmeal and slicing up the mango to kind of garnish it. And this was the morning after a rites-of-passage program that I had organized for a young girl. And her rite of passage, it was something that we kind of moved towards over 6 months. And so I started seeing her from at the beginning of the year, knowing very well that she would be going to boarding school. So she'd be leaving home and going to a whole new country, living in a whole new place, making all new friends. And so it was co-created by her family and I to, over these 6 months, to see her almost every Friday. We would go out into nature and we would, share different skills. We would have various different practices to connect to the natural environment. And I always maintain that in the mentoring or in the guiding process, whether I'm working with a group of girls or with an individual, is that I am co-mentoring with the natural world. And the reason that is because for me, Mother Nature has always been the best teacher, the most consistent teacher.
Sure.
And I also can see increasingly now there's a lot of worship around individuals, with Instagram and the sort of rise of celebrities and wellness and well-being. I'm really quite cautious about putting an individual on a pedestal. And so I've been so grateful to have my main guide and teacher in my life be the natural world. And it's just you and Mother Nature.
Sure.
And so whether or not I'm there physically present, or if, in this case, when she goes off into her boarding school, is that she will know she is always going to be ever present with her mentor, which is in the trees and the soil and the rivers. And she will always be able to access that wisdom and that power through nature, wherever she is. And so that moment was the night after we had done one of our camping trips. And she's really, really into breakfast. Breakfast was like the most important thing. And this was a night after neither of us had slept because the mosquitoes were driving us absolutely crazy. And they were bothering us because one of the challenges that I had for her was to sleep without a tent.
Okay.
And so both of us were just out, sleeping bags, sleeping mats, that's it.
Okay.
And neither of us slept. So I think we were both really looking forward to that fire and to that breakfast in the morning. And it felt like a visual feast. As you said, it's just so aesthetically pleasing to see the contrast of the colors and the fire and
the experience. What time of the year was this?
This was, when was it? It was May, sort of toward, mid-May. So it was pretty warm already.
Okay. It's I think for the people who have never, it's almost shocking to think that there are people who've never experienced this. And in Hong Kong, which is ultimately, I mean, for those of us who can choose to remove ourselves, or who make the choice to say, okay, you know what, we still need to be connected to the amazing outdoors. We can do this. But I'm sure there are lots of kids, and I know that there are a lot of kids who, because it's such an urban environment and because of their family situations, don't understand that the outdoors is a rejuvenating place. You know, it's a great teacher that will teach you some very hard lessons. But I know that there are a lot of kids who probably don't even know what it's like to sit around a fire, like a proper fire outside, or to boil up water and to not have to depend on electricity. And this isn't like super hard roughing it, but I could see how, as an experience, to sleep outside, eaten by mosquitoes, just being miserable, is a great teacher.
Absolutely. It is those moments that will make the stories. You know, if we had a perfectly beautiful night and we slept all fine and everything went well, and you know, okay, that would have been a great experience. But you know, we come back and we're like, oh yeah, that's the thing. Is that we couldn't sleep at all, and the mosquitoes were driving me crazy, and there was a crab that tried to climb up onto my pillow and into my ear while I slept, and like, you know, these are the stories that we remember. And I think as well, when I was, you know, deciding on which photo was it that really captured that sense of the power that the fire brings in bringing people together. I feel like it's, you know, dogs do that and fire does that. And it was, you know, I will happily sit by a fire any night by myself, just make my own fire if I could in the apartment building that I live in. But it's sharing that space with another or with groups of people. That's what makes it so magical, is to be in that community space, which, you know, in thinking about how isolated we are, you know, with COVID has exaggerated that 100-fold. But even as a society, we unconsciously, or sometimes very consciously, separate ourselves from another. We label, so you go over there, I'll go over here. And I don't have anything in common with you because you're like that. And so it's one of those beautiful things, I suppose, a bit like music as well. It can bring, anyone can sit around a fire, anyone can share and know what that feeling is like. So that's the powerful element of the fire.
For sure. You know, I also like the idea of, you know, it's almost like, and you could totally see how it's almost like a living, you know, the way it's so chaotic and beautiful and the movement of it. It's like, it is almost like a living presence, in that, you know, you could see things inside. Yeah, no, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. One of the things I say to people when I'm, well, either teaching them how to make fire or we're just sitting around a fire is, you know, asking, what is it that the fire wants? And you can read it. Does it want more firewood? Does it need more space? Does it need more air? And so exactly like you said, actually, you know, being in dialogue with the fire as if it really was its own being. And every fire will burn for a different reason.
Right.
You have to listen.
Okay, so the reason we met is through different channels, one of which is that my daughter went to one of the camps or one of the experiences that you were a facilitator for another company. But describe how you came to being you at this point, where you're running these experiences for all kinds of people. So yeah, how did your life journey bring you here?
So I mentioned earlier, I grew up in Taipo.
Nice.
The same valley that Kadori Farm is on, so in Lamchun. And my mother, although she got her hair done twice a week and she had perfectly manicured nails and wore beautiful, glamorous dresses, she was a farm girl at heart. She was raised on a farm. And so I think that played a big role in how it was that she allowed my brother and I to just go and explore. And we had the type of childhood where, you know, on holidays and summers, it was just like, go and just come back for dinner. Nice. That was it. We had that level of freedom. And so when we did, you know, it was, a lot of it was going down to the streams and finding fish or whatever plants and algae were kind of left behind. It was climbing trees. It was, for me, a big part was rescuing stray animals and puppies that I would find. And I remember even, it was in an abandoned car. I opened up the hood and noticed that there were all these rat babies in there. And so I brought the rat babies home and like begged my mom if we could keep the babies, which of course she said no. And so these experiences framed the way that I saw the world, and almost they were so unconscious that it wasn't until I became an adult that I saw even how I moved was a training of what I received by the natural world when I was younger.
Okay.
And so I'll tell you what I wanted to be as a kid. I wanted to be a vet, a volcanologist, a counselor. So these were the three things that I was like, any of these things I'd be happy. And it's funny because I kind of managed to, in a way, combine all three in the work that I do now. But it didn't become clear until much later. I knew I was fascinated by the land and the way the earth moved. And so I went and studied geography and continued to do that into university, and knew that I wanted to work for a cause that gave back, whether or not that was for animals or for the planet or for people, and found myself working for an animal welfare charity where I brought therapy dogs into schools to really help educate and create experiences that brought animals and people together. And that was beautiful. I loved doing that. And it came a point where I really wanted to expand that into more looking at conservation and what is it that we can do for the planet that takes care of all of these beings that live on it. So I found myself also getting into permaculture, and then more sort of environmental education-based programs. And while I was running these programs, I was frustrated because I could see the level of apathy on people's faces, whether they were a group of school children or if it was a group of adults. You know, there would be, maybe if I was lucky, I'd get a handful of people who were engaged and would jump into action and be like, right, I'm going to go home and I'm going to do this and I'm going to stop doing that. I'm going to start doing this. And the majority, though, I found were just indifferent. They'd be like, oh, yeah, it sucks for the dolphins. And then kind of go on with their life. And I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand, what it was that I needed to do more of in order to flip that switch.
Wow.
And so I put a lot of this pressure on myself. I was like, you know what, maybe I need to go and get a teaching degree to teach better. And what it did ultimately was actually reflect back onto what and why it is that I feel why is this so important to me? And I went back to my childhood, and it was all of these beautiful experiences. It was seeing that the tree that I used to climb was cut down for another village house to be built. It was going back to the rivers that we used to swim in, and they were filled in with concrete now. And there was a sense of grief and loss that I felt in the same way as, the loss and the sadness that we would feel if we no longer had a loved one near us. And so my journey then became about, it was shifting from an education point of view to facilitating connection, because my understanding and my belief is that if we're in a place of love and relationship and connection with something, if it's another being, if it's a tree, if it's the river or the land or the rocks, we don't need to be told. We don't need to be educated on what to do. It becomes innate. It becomes instinctive.
Yeah, you're connected for sure.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. Because in a way, it's a very personal journey that you have to invent for yourself, because it's not a clear path, right? So you're just like, okay, well, what you're doing is quite, I don't know many people who do what you're doing. And so you've kind of had to find these channels and invent these paths that led you to this. What would you say was the most meaningful event that really... Okay, so on the one hand, you have these formative memories, formative experiences that really kind of set the foundation. But then, as you get older, you kind of crystallize it so you can share it with other people. So was there, if somebody is listening to you is saying, well, that really resonates with me. So what did you do, would you say, that really kind of crystallized it in a way that helps you give it to other people in a kind of more quasi-professional sense?
Oh, bugger. I was going to go into like a really spiritual story.
No, let's do it. Let's go in the direction you want. Don't let me impose. Much better to go your direction.
Well, no, I think what I'll say to that is, and I will go into the story, but I'll say first, it was what it feels like to me is that I don't have a choice. And being somebody who values freedom and sovereignty highly, the fact if someone says you don't have a choice, that freaks me out. But in this sense, it feels almost like gravity, and fighting against it is just wrong. It's a little bit like trying to paddle upstream, and I'm not going to go into the sense of the cliche of like go with the flow, but there is a sense of listening to the opportunities that are coming up and not fighting them like I was doing, and just going with where the opportunities and what felt good. And I know that's an incredible privilege, and I recognize every single day how privileged I am to be able to choose something that feels good for me. There are a lot of people out there who don't have that choice, and it's just something that we have to do on a survival basis. And for me, this experience of the embodiment of everything that I do, so it's not just work for me, it's literally enveloped into my cells, and therefore I don't have a choice. But it's the best reason to not have a choice.
Right. That makes great sense to me. And if anything, when I hear it, what I also hear is that, you have the privilege to be able to do this for yourself and whatever. On the other hand, you could just as easily have said, well, I'm going to become a broker or a banker. It's like, okay. But instead what you're doing is you're trying to figure out how to connect. You're giving this service of experience to other people. And what an amazing gift.
Yeah. And it's a gift to me as well. I think in so many ways, yes, it would be nice to have financial freedom. But to go down a path that feels so wrong for me, like, for example, being a broker or something that doesn't feel aligned, whatever it is, that would feel like hell. And I think partly a lot of my journey into getting to this point is not necessarily growing any capacity to do more or see more or be aware of more. It's been actually knocking down barriers in which I had put up from whatever it was, conditioning in my life or societal pressures. It's actually been knocking down these walls that I had constructed myself to be able to see, right, so actually I have all of these options in front of me.
Right.
Yeah. Do you want to hear the story?
Yeah. No. Yes. Absolutely.
So this experience really freaked me out. I'll say that because I know that I've shared this story a few times, and I'm aware that it can be not divisive, but it can be. Anyway, I'll just share it.
Yeah.
And not prep it.
Shoot it raw.
Yes, exactly. I was at a retreat with one of my just most beloved teachers, Satish Kumar, who comes to Hong Kong, or had been coming to Hong Kong fairly regularly to offer workshops, and we were just sort of completing a retreat with him where he was sharing just everything from his journey of, he was a Jain monk in the 60s, living in India, and his teacher really guided him or knocked down some of these walls for him as well. And it ended up in this idea where him and his friend at the time walked from India to the 4 countries at the time who had nuclear power.
Oh, wow.
And it was a walk for peace. And so they walked from India to Russia, to France, to the UK, and then across to the US. And they did this with no money. So they literally had to rely on the kindness of strangers. And I mean, the stories that they had collected along the way. And it was beautiful because as they were on their way into Russia, which is the first place they sort of went to try and meet the leaders there, they passed through some tea plantations. And these women who were plucking the tea leaves were like, what are these two like brown men doing walking through this? This is so weird. And so they got into a conversation. And and Satish and his friend shared, this is why we're doing this. This is our mission for a walk for peace. And the women there actually gave them 4 bundles of tea and said, when you meet the leaders of these 4 nations, then give them this packet of tea and ask them before they do anything crazy, just sit down and have a cup of tea first. So that's what they did. They delivered the 4 packages of tea to these different countries. And along the way, what Satish speaks of is that he realizes, you as he's growing up, you learn, especially with the various different conflicts from different countries, I am a Jain, or I am a Buddhist, or I am a Christian. And by labeling ourselves, we, in some instances, can segregate and just put, others to another corner. And he said their experience of walking through the world was that I was no longer an Indian man. I was a student of the earth. We are all Mother Nature's children. And so it kind of dissolved all of these walls that had been put up to separate us. So anyway, that's him. And the night before the end of the day, I was like, I'm having just so many insights and so inspired. And every morning, what I had been doing is first thing in the morning was to go for a walk before sunrise. So 5:30, I go down for a walk through the forest and then come back up. And on the very last day, a friend of mine said she would come and join me. And as I was walking down, I noticed there were some blades of grass where, as children, my mom taught us how to whistle using the grass. And it comes out like quite a high-pitched, squeaky sound. And so I'm showing her how to whistle, and she's kind of not getting it, but I'm whistling through the grass. And as I'm whistling, I can hear that there's, in the distance, there's the same kind of whistle and this squeaking. I'm like, oh, that's weird. Is there someone coming behind us? And so the whole trail, we can hear, I'm still whistling from the bamboo leaves, and we can hear the sound in the distance. I was like, okay, this is kind of freaky. Is there someone who's trying to, scare us now? And so on the way back up, I noticed that wherever we heard the whistle, there were certain trees that were rubbed together, and in the wind, as they moved, they created a bit of a squeaking sound as their branches rubbed next to each other. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And so went back and had this very last day with Satish. And as he was speaking, he mentioned, or he was teaching us about the Prakriti and the Purusha, which in India means the spirit and the matter, and how you don't have matter without spirit. And then he said, when you hear the trees sing to you, then you're in the presence of the matter and the spirit when they're aligned. And in that moment, I realized that morning I was singing to the trees, and unbeknownst to me, they were singing back. And so it was this profound experience where it was walking along the edge of the world that we see and the world that is unseen. Yeah, and I think from that experience, it really propelled me into understanding nature and the natural world in more than just matter. It was involving the spirit as well.
As you're telling me this and I'm listening to you, if you think about it, like the whole premise of this podcast is we start with 3 photos and we just kind of dive in. And by very nature, photographs are just what you see. And what you see ultimately means something different to different people. And in the same way that people who are listening to you, their brains are filling in boxes or whatever, because just listening to your accent, which is, you grew up in Hong Kong, like somebody might say, oh, she sounds so posh and she sounds so this and try, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
As opposed to just listening to the musicality of it and just listening to what you're trying to say and and also connecting that. It could be stupid, but it can also be sublime. And so yeah, thank you for that story. It wasn't so crazy. It wasn't so. It was a beautiful story.
Thank you. I did censor it a little bit. There was a lot of that was just the essence of that. Let's just say.
Sure.
But you're right. I think had I not have pieced together all of these different puzzle pieces that came to me that day, it would have been just that one time where, I squeaked with a leaf and then the trees squeaked with their branches, and I would have walked away being like, oh, cool. But it is the meaning that we make from these experiences that can make them so profound.
Thank you for this beautiful, sweet moment. It's already been an hour. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me, Randall Fancy, for this episode of Shooting It Raw. I really appreciate it. If you want to learn more about the show in general or today's guest in particular, be sure to check out the episode notes at www.shootingitraw.com. That's shooting-it-raw.com. I appreciate everyone who takes some time out of their day to give Shooting It Raw a listen. So get out there, make amazing photos, and be sure to appreciate how amazing the world is. Gratitude and a sense of humor go a long way. Catch you next time.